Hi, this is Dr. Janie Pendleton, and we are back with Maranatha Minutes. This is my husband, Dr. John Pendleton. He's joined us today to continue on our adventure through Genesis, and he's really been dedicating a lot of information, and we're just really having fun doing this. And we hope that we just hope that you're ready to come to Christ, and write us and leave a message below. This is an open forum. So we're taking all comments and questions, and we'll be getting to those in just a minute. But first, you want to say a quick prayer?
Sure.
I'll let you pray this time.
Dear Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you that you've delivered us from evil, and that you delivered Noah and his family so that we could have us here on the earth. Thanks for Jesus, and that he has saved us from our sins. Pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you for that. All right, so if you want to open up your Bibles to Genesis chapter 7, we will begin. And just for a little bit of back history here, we just went through where God was pleased with Noah, so he's saving Noah, and Noah's prepared the ark. And quite a few hundred years here now have passed. Noah's 600 years old. He had 500 years to warn the people, and 100 years to gather the animals and to build the ark with his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And now Shem, Ham, and Japheth are married. Noah is married, and it's time now to load the ark. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Who built the ark? Noah, Noah.
Yeah.
That was our song from
Took him
Sunday
a long
school.
time.
Yeah. It was a big ark, and nobody had probably accomplished anything like that before. But with God's guidance, it was like building an aircraft carrier for just a small family. That had been a very difficult thing to do.
Big boat.
Yeah.
No
But we know
rain.
that they used the pitch for the boat because that was waterproofing, and we know that that's a very rich in tar and oil filled land over there. So we know enough time would have went by that they had fossils to make oil and stuff in the earth. So we do know on our timeline for how long everybody lived, that was a long time had passed. Okay, so here we are now. We're ready to build the boat. So Genesis chapter 7. Finally, the day came when the Lord said to Noah, "Go into the boat with all of your family. For among all the people of the earth, I consider you alone to be righteous. Bring in the animals too, a pair of each, except those kinds I have chosen for eating and for the sacrifice. Take 7 pairs of each of them." So in the original Bible, it talks about clean and unclean animals. He says, take 2 of the unclean, each in their mate, a male and a female, and 7, which is an odd number, and 7 for sacrifices and eating. Now 2 of those would be to continue the male and female would be to continue. And if any of them were to pass probably on the ship, he knew that they would have enough to be able to have enough of the right kind of clean food to eat. And that was very important. And we'll get to that in a list of the animals that quite a bit on there that were clean and unclean in just a minute. And take 7 pairs of every kind of bird. And you asked, okay, now why would he take the birds? Well, because after flooding the earth, the birds had no place to perch or to land. Eventually, they would have wore out, and they would have died.
And there were flightless birds.
Yeah,
So,
even the ducks and the geese and things, they all eventually have to have land. Thus, there will be every kind of life reproducing again after the flood was ended. 1 week from today, I will begin 40 days and 40 nights of rain. So that's 1 week. That was 7 days. He gave them 7 days to get everybody on board. And since it was like a zoo, he was probably already using it almost like the boat. He's probably already using it like a barn anyway. So the animals were probably pretty much on board, except for maybe some of the birds and things. So I'm sure they were in quite the rush. And I mean, they had a long time to prepare.
Well, 100 years at least.
And people probably thought they were nuts, making fun of them and stuff, until the rains came. And can you imagine the hordes of people that were probably trying to get on board the ship?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure God protected them. I will begin 40 days and 40 nights of rain, and all the animals and birds and the reptiles I have made will die. So Noah did everything the Lord commanded him. He was 600 years old when the flood came. He boarded the boat with his wife, the ark. He boarded the ark with his wife and sons and their wives to escape the flood. With him were all the various kinds of animals, those for eating and for sacrifice, and those that were not, and the birds and the reptiles. They came into the boat in pairs, male and female, just as God commanded Noah. 1 week later, when Noah was 600 years, 2 months, and 17 days old, the rain came down in mighty torrents from the sky. It just poured buckets. And the subterranean waters burst forth upon the earth for 40 days and nights, meaning the geysers burst open. And we still have the geysers today. You can go see some of the geysers. But Noah, he opened up the earth with water. He just opened it up, cracked it open, and just pushed it out. But Noah had gone into the boat that very day with his wife and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. With them in the boat were pairs of every kind of animal, domestic and wild, and reptiles and birds of every sort. So you can imagine what kind of zoo he had in there, from lions, tigers, and bears, or whatever type of animals they had. They talk about in Egypt that they had black leopards and things, and panthers and things. So we know that they had very exotic animals. Just by the cloth that they were wearing.
It's like the dog kind, though.
Yeah.
You'd have one basic kind that God created, and we have a whole variety of dogs. Yeah, by breeding and selection and things.
So we're going from wolves to husky, because we bred them and made them into man-bred them.
Yeah.
But they would have done that as well during this time.
Well, I think there were some, but there was the basic kinds is what they were focused on.
Yeah, so 2 by 2 they came, male and female, just as God had commanded. Remember, God's spirit, and he told the animals to go in. God controlled the animals. He controls the creation. Then the Lord God closed the door and shut them in. For 40 days, the roaring floods prevailed. Can you imagine what that sounded like outside? And you start swishing and start moving, and then you just know it really is happening in that moment. You just got to have strong faith in that moment in time. You know it? Very frightening. Covering the ground and lifting the boat, or the ark, high above the earth. As the water rose higher and higher above the ground, the boat floated safely up on the waters. Until finally the water covered all the high mountains under the whole heaven. Now you'll notice there, heaven is not a plural. It says heaven, under the whole heaven. It's one word. Standing 22 feet and more above the highest peaks.
And that had to be this is a divine revelation. A lot of people debate whether there was a global flood or not. It says here that there was a global flood. If you want to write in and ask some questions, just write in and ask some questions.
We'll be happy to answer your questions. That's what we're here for.
Yes. But it was a global flood, not a local flood. And all the mountains, it says, were underwater at least 20 feet or more. So who knew how high the mountains were? It was God. God told Moses, and Moses wrote this down, and the revealed fact was there was a universal flood. Some people were spared, Moses, his wife, and their wives.
And their children, yeah. Okay, so now, that brings us back to where we were.
Let's see.
All existence of the earth was blotted out. Man and animals alike, and reptiles and birds. God destroyed them all, leaving only Noah alive and those with him in the boat. And the water covered the earth 150 days. Now, we're going to discuss the 150 days, because you need a timeline here to understand of how he raised the waters over a period of time and then dropped them. They actually did not get out of the boat in 150 days. It was almost a year before the waters receded. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, but they were above the mountain level. For it to recede, that took 150 days for the waters to clear enough that they saw land. That's probably when he kept sending the bird out and she came back with a twig or something. We don't know that part.
Well, he sent out a scavenous bird,
yeah.
and the bird flew across the waters, finding flesh or whatever else they found.
Yeah. That's why I kept him.
And perching on the outside of the boat, but didn't come back to him in the boat.
Yeah.
And then there was a process, but we get to that in chapter 8.
That's right. So, but what I want to say is the 150 days itself is when they could see land, and that's probably about the time that they probably hit. Would you say it was within the year that they hit land that they were actually able to get off the ship? So they were on the ship almost a full year.
Yes, almost a full year.
Almost a full year. You're talking about the time getting on it before the rains coming. You're talking about the rains receding enough, over 2 feet for the water to drop, and for them to find a place to land the ship. And even if it landed itself, I'm sure God put it where he wanted it, but they still couldn't farm the soil or do anything yet because all of that was taken away. Other than probably some marine life and some marine plant life, everything was gone.
Well, yeah, the things that lived in the sea, the focus here was God was wiping out all land creatures. And God selected...
the cities, and even the cities and the buildings that were made. He wanted it gone.
Well, he wanted it gone. So, and he wanted it gone because of the evil that they were doing.
Mm-hmm. So we've decided to go ahead and continue on with chapter 8. Because chapter 8 has a lot to do with chapter 7. And it's a short chapter. So follow along with us in Genesis chapter 8. God didn't forget about Noah and all the animals in the boat. He sent a wind to blow across the waters. And the floods began to disappear. With a high wind, he started drying everything out. For the subterranean water sources ceased their gushing, and the torrential rains subsided. So the flood gradually receded until 150 days after it began. The boat came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. 3 months later, as the waters continued to go down, other mountain peaks began to appear. Can you imagine starting to see in the distance the other mountain peaks? So he landed them on one of the highest mountain peaks, if not the highest, and he allowed them to have sturdy, solid ground. He knew they wouldn't be able to be on this ship for very long, and he took care of them. After another 40 days in the Bible seems to be a good number there. We're going to discuss that in a minute as well. So in Genesis 8:6, after another 40 days, Noah opened a porthole, the opening in the side of his ship, and released a raven that flew back and forth until the earth was dry. Meanwhile, he was sent out a dove to see if it could land or find dry land. He wanted dry ground. But the dove found no place to light, which means to land, and returned to Noah, for the water was still too high. So Noah held out his hand and drew the dove back into the vessel, back into the ark. 7 days later, Noah released the dove again, and this time towards evening. The bird returned to him with an olive leaf in her beak. So Noah knew that the water was almost gone. I mean, it was down to the area where there were olive trees, so he knew that they could come out again. A week later, he released the dove again, and this time she didn't come back, which meant she found a home, a tree to perch, and a place to roost.
Mm-hmm.
A place to light. It's a nice word, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is the light. 29 days after that, Noah opened the door to look, and the water was gone. I mean, can you imagine how scared they were to come out?
You wouldn't want to uncover everything too quickly. Yeah.
No, yeah. Then God told Noah, "You may all go out. Release all the birds and animals and reptiles so that they will breed abundantly." We're starting all over again, baby. "And reproduce in great numbers." So the boat was soon empty. Noah and his wife and his son and their wives all disembarked, along with all the animals, reptiles, and birds. All left the ark in pairs and groups. Can you imagine how happy even the animals were? They were probably jumping around the little sheep in the grass and all happy. And you know how a newborn calf is, or a horse, where they finally get out into the hayfield for the first time.
Well, yeah.
On board. Then Noah built an altar and sacrificed on it some of the animals and birds God had designated for just that purpose. And Jehovah was pleased with the sacrifice and said to himself, "I will never do it again. I will never again curse the earth, destroying all living things, even though man's bent is always towards evil. From his earliest youth, and even though he does such wicked things, as long as the earth remains, there will be a springtime and a harvest. Cold and heat means winter and summer. Winter and summer, day and night. It means the sun and the moon will continue to revolve around the earth. We will continue to spin and do all these things across the universe. And we will stay on our path because that's what God wishes us to do. There's no other God. There's no other mighty God. Thank you, Jesus. There's nobody else that can do for us what he has done for us and still be so forgiving. As long as the earth remains, there will be springtime and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night." Isn't that the best story ever? I love that story. Okay, so let's get to the questions we have here for those who sent in some questions. Okay, Ricky from Maine. I finally got to you, Ricky, because we finally got to this chapter. And yes, I thought it was exciting too. But Ricky from Maine asked, "How long was Noah and his family in the ark?" Okay, well, like it says here, Noah was 600 years old when he got into the ark. He was 600 years old. 500 years trying to get the people in and trying to get them to change their ways. 100 years of building it and preparing all the animals. They were in the ark for the 40 days and the 40 nights of the flood. They probably would have went in a couple of days sooner, whenever the rain started. God said, "I'm going to flood the earth in 7 days, get prepared." So he probably was starting to spend the night in there in the ark with the animals at that point. I mean, wouldn't you? You're babysitting the animals. And animals can kind of feel something's happening. You know, if you get your dog ever barking, you know something's out there, something's going on. You know, they can feel the earth moving in earthquakes. They predict these things because God is in the animals. He's in the creation. And he told them what to do. He led them to the ark. Yeah.
So the word here
was
says
animal, and the
that
word
the
was
animals that came to Noah.
They came to Noah. It says it right there. Yeah, the animals came to Noah.
About a year that he was on the ark, though.
Yeah, so about a year on the ark. Before they found land and was able to get them back off there and everything, you know, we're in that time zone, so about a year. And they would have used that as their home and as for the shelter. I mean, can you imagine? Until they could get out and you don't know, I mean, if the trees were all disappeared or broken down the ground, you don't know how they rebuilt a home or what they did. Or did they live up on the mountainside like goat herders? Or, I mean, you wonder where they went to after that. But I'm sure they multiplied very quickly because they still had Shem, Ham, and Japheth. They had wives, and all that was intended for them to multiply. And we're going to get to that. Okay? So now, Caroline from Alabama asked, "Why did God tell Noah to take 2 of the unclean male and female mates of each kind, but only 7 clean animals driven into the ark. And why is 7 an odd number? Well, I think we pretty much answered that here, but I'll say it again. It was for sacrifices and for eating. Remember, he built the altar to God, and the first thing he did was he sacrificed the animals that God had directed him to. So he already knew that there would be a sacrifice of these animals ahead of time, and he took care of them. You know, and plus I think it gave them something to do, like, you know, like, I got to listen to God. I got to make sure these animals make it through. They're the sacrifice. You know, you had to keep them alive. It would have been a lot of work. And even for a year on board, that's a long time. I've lived on a farm for exactly 1 year, and it was a lot of work. It was just a swine farm. I couldn't imagine any horses or goats and multiple kinds of things.
Well, some animals hibernate too.
Mm-hmm.
So if there was a period of sleep that some went through,
Yeah, you know.
but basically God selected those kinds that would be after the flood.
They were God's selection that Noah went and got. It was a selection of God.
And they came to him, and then Noah provided for them.
So maybe a woolly mammoth didn't make it, but maybe the elephant did, because that was God's selection. You know, we just don't know that. We just know that God had selection. And the unclean animals were animals that you did not eat. They were like the wild beasts, the things that you would not have eaten. Tigers, bears, I don't know, things you would not have eaten. You know, things that slivered around on the ground, and mice and rats and things. I don't know. Those things would have been on board anyway because of the feed and the food. They would have found their little way in. So Kyle from Michigan asked, how high did the floods get? Okay, well, they were about 20 feet. We just had this discussion. They were about 20 feet over the tallest mountain range. And we know that range would have been somewhere near the Ararat Mountains.
Well, I'm not sure how tall the tallest mountain at this time was.
Yeah, that's a question. How tall?
We don't
the
know
mountains.
how tall the mountain was, but we do know that the only person Noah
Like Mount
wasn't out.
Kilimanjaro, was it there? We don't know that had heaved up yet.
Moses wasn't, or Noah wasn't measuring the water.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be God told Moses that, hey, I covered the mountains at least 20 feet or more. Mm-hmm. So the idea of the global flood is presented here, that God covered the earth with water.
And also archaeological findings will tell you that the earth was covered at one time in water.
There's, and some of you may have questions in reference to some of those things, and I can answer those offline in reference to just write a note, and we can give you
Better
information. Better information about it.
So I hope that answers your question, Kyle. So about 20 feet over the highest mountain range.
Well, yeah, and you have to know that Moses was also an Egyptian. And Moses, they
We're
had
not talking about Noah here. He's bringing up Moses.
Well,
Okay,
Moses is the author. I believe Moses was the author of the first 5 books.
I know, that's what I'm saying. You need to explain that.
I believe that Moses was the author of the first 5 books of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's plenty of information that goes to that.
Mm-hmm.
When God was talking to Moses, he told him, hey, I covered the mountains, the tallest one, at least with 20 feet of water above the tallest mountain at the time. God's idea, he knew exactly how long the year was, because he created it. He created the sun, moon, and the stars. He created the earth. As God was talking to Moses, Moses had an Egyptian background. The Egyptians had a 365-day calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd have to adjust a little bit for the 0.25, but they had a pretty good handle on, how things were working. Moses was educated as an Egyptian. God was talking to Moses in reference to years,
Did you know that the Great Pyramid, that the staircase is in there? At the angle to the stars of the pyramids, the angled steps points to the North Star during the year of the birth of Christ, when the North Star would have been in the sky, and the bottom of the floor points towards Bethlehem in the main chamber. A lot of people didn't know that, and they were just kind of fiddling around, some scientists and some mathematicians, and realized maybe the steps in the pyramid, in the Great Pyramid, actually leads, in the Khufu, actually leads to something. Because there was no king up there. There was nothing up there. But there was a lot of hieroglyphics. So they were wondering what a lot of it meant. And they believed that it was a staircase, what they believe, somebody might have descended into heaven from that room, was taken. Or somebody robbed everything, found their way in, which is possible too. But you can sit there and have these conversations all week long. But I think that's pretty interesting that the night of Bethlehem, the night of the star and everything, that these staircases were already made and aimed towards the direction of Bethlehem and towards the North Star. Okay, Helen writes back in again. Hi, Helen. This is the second question from Helen. I wanted to get to your second question, and I didn't want to get it until we got to this chapter, so I hope this helps. Clean animals. The list of the clean animals is listed in Deuteronomy chapter 4. And they contain things like oxen, sheep, goats, deer, gazelles. The things that would have been sacrificed, or things, if you're things that would have been like sheep herder type, herded animals. Deer and gazelle were actually part of that. They were clean to eat, or clean to be sacrificed. Your best kill, so to speak. Your best herd, best of the herd. Mm-hmm. So we do know those would have been the things that they would have been eaten, and things that would have sacrificed for God. Your best, the best of the best. And in Leviticus chapter 1, it talks about what were the unclean animals that would have been on the ark. And they considered unclean animals, of course, swine, camels, a hare, which would have been like a rabbit, which would have been like a wild hare of some sort, and a rock badger. That was just some of the examples. I mean, there's more. That's just some of the examples. And why they were considered unclean, well, I don't think that they felt you should eat a camel. People rode camels. It was kind of like, it's probably a horse would probably, assume would probably be under that category as well. But they had camels. That's what they had. And as far as hares went, I wonder why why rabbits would have been in the unclean. Well, I would have thought they would have wore the hare furs and would have eaten the rabbits.
Well,
I just thought.
I don't know, the Levitical law, or the laws passed down to Moses as far as what to eat, unclean and clean. Mm-hmm. We do know that swine and stuff like that have, if you don't cook it very well, then there can be issues. Mm-hmm. But there was an issue with eating different animals, and in the Old Testament law, there was a distinction between the clean and the unclean. In the New Testament church, the Jewish Christians had a real problem with eating with the Gentiles because they ate rabbit and other different things. And socially, even today, if you go different places and you sit down and people eat what you don't eat, it can cause an issue. But religiously, the Jews definitely had clean, kosher ideas. And if you ate anything outside that kosher realm, you were defiling your body and defiling the temple. Mm-hmm. So there's a shift. Paul says it's not that way any longer. And we're not under the Levitical law. But there is definitely a distinction between clean and unclean.
Okay. Well, thank you for explaining that.
I don't know if I rambled.
All right, well, I think that's it for questions for the night. I think we're going to go ahead and end it, so this video's not so long. You can tolerate us on the next one. So we'll go ahead and have another prayer. This is Psalm 6:8. Lord, lead me as you promised me you would. Otherwise, my enemies will conquer me. Tell me clearly what to do and which way to turn. For they cannot speak one truthful word. Their hearts are filled to the brim with wickedness. These suggestions are full of stench of sin and death. Their tongues are filled with flatteries to gain their wicked ends. O God, hold them responsible. Catch them in their own traps. Let them fall beneath the weight of their own transgressions. for they rebel against you. In other words, if someone's hurting you and you're of Christ, they are hurting God, and that's even a bigger sin, and that's very, very wrong. So remember that. The next time someone's hurting you, just say to yourself, pray for them, pray for their souls, because they are hurting God. And you're not as important as God. He is very important. He should be number one in your life, and you should dedicate everything and all that you have unto God through Christ. Thank you, Jesus. Amen.
Thank you.
Now, go be safe and be blessed. And we'll see you back here for Genesis chapter 9. Blessings.
Happy holidays.
Oh yeah, happy holidays. Oh, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
We're not afraid to say it. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We
Can we
wish
sing
you. Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
Did somebody else come up with Merry Christmas? We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas
and a Happy New Year.
Now, somebody asked me, one of the questions that asked me, and I didn't put it on here, what did I fix for John for dinner tonight? Well, I did cook dinner tonight after canning all night last night. I canned Swedish meatballs all night. I made John, what did we have?
We had baked potatoes and Salisbury steak. It was very good.
Yeah, and I froze I should know. I froze up 44 Salisbury steaks last night.
And we spoiled the dog by feeding it a hamburger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we had brown gravy, Salisbury steaks, and mushrooms.
And peas.
Peas. Gotta have my peas, because I love peas. You gotta eat your greens.
Yeah.
God would have you eat your greens.
It was very good.
It was delicious.